Okay, good morning. My name is Kai Hackbart. I'm with Bosch Software Innovations. I'm also in the board of directors of the OSGI Alliance, and I'm the moderator for this morning's session. I'm seeing already a couple of these anniversary t-shirts. For those of you that don't have them already, very good, yeah. You can get them downstairs. We also have socks. You just need to, go there and they will hand it out to you. Additionally, I don't know if you've seen it already, we have various places where we have big banners with use cases from OSGI Alliance. So if you're interested in this, so one of them is over there on the other side. If you want, another one is downstairs, so just have a look. All right, and so the first presentation is from Jürgen Albert from Data in Motion about BND Eclipse RCP Product Expert.
Yeah, quite a mouthful, the title. Hello, everyone. I'm happy that at least a few gotten up this morning to get here. Yeah, my name is Jürgen Albert. I'm the CEO of Data in Motion Consulting GmbH. We are Alliance members now for 3 years, but actually founded for 10 years ago. And we started out with mostly RCP development, switched over more to the server side. So we had the topic of improving PDE and the way things for RCP developers should work out for quite some time for ourselves. And yeah, as we entered the OSGI Alliance, we switched to BND. And yeah, since that time, somehow this topic follows around with us. So why RCP support for BND? So currently, if you develop, most of you might know, or I guess you know the pain points. So you need to use PDE. So at the time, PDE was good. Nowadays, it has a lot of pain points which never really gotten away. So the one thing is the target platform. Everybody I know about using PDE somehow complains about the target platform, getting things into the target platform. You are stuck with P2, and this usually costs in regular intervals days of development time for one or each developer in the team. Tycho came around a bit later, which made things much more convenient in many ways, made it easier, more handleable. But what it was totally missing was giving you, I'm not quite sure how it is nowadays. It's 3 years time since we used it in anger. But I always found at build time, it is totally cool. At development time, you still have the problem that you need a target platform. And even if Tycho is capable of grabbing its stuff from Maven somewhere, from Maven repositories, yeah, still the PDE is not capable of doing this. So, and the other thing is, in recent years, I've got a feeling that PDE is more in the maintenance mode. I believe last year there was the point where somebody told me the last PDE developer said, I will not do anything anymore. So, and I guess most of you or most using it have some pain point or which might not be listed here, so just put it in there in your head. So I took a look in Bugzilla. So I know this is a little bit unfair, the chart I pulled out of it, because it only looks at new and resolved, not what is won't fix, no bug and duplicates and so forth. But the main thing is the rise here and the drop here, which is kind of telling the story. So there is no real improvement and development in PDE at the time. They still don't, I guess I have another slide for it. Yeah, for example, they don't plan on, for example, supporting the latest component annotation. So PDE still uses version 1.4. The current OSGI version is 1.6 with new features. And yeah, so there are no real plans there. There are efforts by the community, but it's hard to do. So why then BND? It's close at hand, the whole thing. So one thing, when you get started with it, the initial steps are hard, but then it's easy to use. So you always have full control over what you're doing. It's at build time, it behaves nearly exactly as at development time, which always gave me the feeling while I was working with it, it works as it should work. Not this little edgy thing we had before with PDE and Taiko, where they always had been, what I built on my machine is not the same thing which the Jenkins was producing. So with PDE, with BND, this is no real problem. So, and as I've been, in the end, it's also because of all the abilities BND has, it leads to better OSGI code in the end, because it makes it easier to structure your things, to refactor your things, to test your code. This is something intuitively you come to the point that you build smaller bundles, you build more effective bundles, and also you don't have to maintain your manifest yourself. This is the different approach. Yeah, which then leads to better bundles. So simply by tooling doing the job for you. So, and the other big thing, no target platform, because BND itself supports all common repositories, or the most common repositories you will find out there in the wild, like Maven or our OCI bundle repositories, and even P2 nowadays. Maybe not full featured, but it does. Additionally, it has a very active community. We recently pushed out 4.3, and in a couple of days 4.3.1 will be available, so not quite sure what the timeline is. And what it also does, it always usually supports the latest specifications of OCI, because this is the go-to tool for developing OCI. And the other one thing, I'm not quite sure if this is the right wording for it, the hot bundle deployment, meaning you start your IDE once, or in your IDE runtime once, and then it constantly deploys the bundles when you save them. So, which really spares time in the end and speeds up your development. So, since we became members of the Alliance and switched to BND ourselves, we try to promote the use of BND over PDE, and for the last 2 years here at the EclipseCon, we gave talks about it, made a tutorial about it, and what I always saw, that there was a lot of interest by the community, and a lot of people had been sitting in there, and by the end it always came up that it turned out that one or more RCP developers came around and said, can we export our product with it? Is it working with RCP? And we always had to say, yes, kind of. So the whole thing was born with the product export. Because after the last EclipseCon, a few desperate people came around and said, okay, we've heard PDE is kind of dead, so can you help us? Can you do something about it? And we always had a feeling, we know what we need to do in order to get it done. So at this point, thanks to Brooker, yeah, they are sinking in their seats now, because they made it possible that I could do this. So I wanted to say thank you for this, because actually this is one thing, even as we are not really developing RCP in recent years anymore, was still a thing what I really wanted to do. So before we get started, a small dive in the actual launch process of Eclipse, because this is the biggest part the whole thing is handling and doing. So I only touch a few points here. It's much more details. You see, the native launcher alone is, as the relevant parts are at least 3,000 lines of code written in C. And what it does is, when you have your executable, the exit, whatever it's told on all the other, the DSO, it looks and does some magic to identify where the hell your Java runtime is located. So even as you can have it in your workspace or somewhere in the folder, you can have it named somewhere in the companion ini. It looks for the Java home, so it does a lot of magic here in order to figure out where you might have stored and hidden your JRE. Then it furthermore looks in the ini, looks where which startup jar you've named there, and then it starts Java reflectively with C. creates the declared main class it finds in the startup jar. And funny thing is, in comparison to a normal Java, where you could start with Java minus jar, where it starts the main class, no, this starts a run method. So it's okay. So they use the run method for this, and then it gets over to the next stage. So another 3,000 lines of code. This is the Equinox launcher main class, which is in, I believe the bundle is org Equinox launcher, something like org Eclipse Equinox launcher, something like this. This tries to, first of all, what this does, it tries to identify the native library to use. The native library is the one thing that pulls up the splash screen. So the native library itself is named in the config ini. You might have seen it in the Eclipse ini. There's always this native library which points to a jar. Then it again starts magic to try to find inside the jar the fitting DLL or whatever system you are using by pure force of will and magic, I have to say. Then they also factor in, is it maybe something language specific? So more magic is added on top of the whole process. Then they initialize their JNI bridge, pull up the splash screen. Then they create a class loader, a basic one, load the actual framework jar into it, and hand the whole process over to the so-called Eclipse starter. So then the Eclipse starter comes around, another 1,500 lines of code I had to dig through for the whole thing. And this is where the magic happens, or the next magic happens. So this bundle or this class starts the Equinox framework, installs all your bundles. Then it goes over them and bundles that should be started lazy. This was always something I never really fit in my mind when I looked at it. To get things started in Eclipse, you have to tell it, start lazy. So, and then the Eclipse starter comes around, looks at the defined start levels for each bundle, and if they have the bundle start policy lazy, and then starts them according to your start levels. After all of this, it starts the Equinox application or product you have defined in your ini or somewhere else, and then registers the splash handler and startup monitor, which is the wrapper around the Java native, also the JNI bridge for your splash screen. So this is only the roughing, so there is much more happening. Most things I've additionally found, they translate wildly properties in OCI properties. So meaning most of the things you can put in your Eclipse ini, so like minus data or things like this, it internally then translates to something like OCI workspace, also OCI something location, so which is an official OCI property. So for most things it has there, it does some kind of putting it from A to B. So if you would cut this out, you could maybe skip like 1,000 lines of code in the whole thing. So in comparison to this, the BND launcher, or BND launch process in a nutshell. So the whole thing is, it starts with an embedded launcher, it's also called. So it's a neat little class that actually only creates a class loader and puts all defined run path classes or class path libraries basically on the class path, looks through them, looks if somewhere there is a main class defined, and starts it as Java usually is doing it by calling main, the public void, the public static main method, which is the usual start point in Java. So in this case, this is then the BND launcher, which is doing the actual initialization of the bundle of the framework. It installs also bundles, starts all bundles that are not set to lazy right now, right then, and that's it. So, and a little bit more, but this is the gist of it. So, and the overall thing is like 2,000 lines of code in comparison to the heap I've told you about before. So, thing is, actually, BND is perfectly capable of launching a full-blown Eclipse RCP and also exporting it. But the whole thing feels a little bit like this. So, it works, but nice is something different. Why is this the case? The first thing is, BND, as where you're in PDE, you always have to slap your things together by adding features, and you have to know where your features are and where your bundles reside and which feature and so on and so forth. They also have a resolving mechanism, but it never worked for me. I'm not quite sure if it is how it is for you. You say add the additional bundles that are required, then it always blew up. So this is something which is kind of messy when you use the Eclipse or RCP bundles somewhere. Then I will show it later to you. The BND resolver will not really know what to do with it because nothing is declared there. Next thing is the lazy the bundles marked as lazy will not be started simply. So when you have a small application, you will have everything installed at a certain point, but Eclipse core runtime is not started, your extension registry is not available, so nothing really is happening there. And the next thing is that the Equinox applications also will not be started because I've told you before, this is done outside of the framework. So nobody knows about it, that he needs to start whatever you have declared in your in any INI. Next thing, splash screen is not possible at all, at least not in the mechanism as Eclipse is defining and using. And as another small little Eclipse Equinox oddity is OCI has so-called framework properties, which are accessible via an interface, which is registered as a service. Equinox has its own extension with something extra, which is also filled up by the Eclipse starter outside of the framework. So again, something BND is not or cannot even know about. And in the end, BND usually exports a self-executing jar, which is in itself, it does the job, but I know especially for Eclipse RCP developers which want to provide a professional-looking product to their customers, this is something they don't really want to say, okay, you can start with a batch or a file or whatever. So the idea with the launcher there, the native launcher makes sense. So this is something BND currently cannot provide. So before I dive into what I've done, a few things up front. The Eclipse, the thing I've done here, or we have done here, I've tried to do it as OCI-like as possible, meaning all the things that Eclipse startup process is doing outside the actual framework, I've tried to put into the framework. So it can theoretically work with any other environment there. Maybe one time with Felix or things like this, but this is just a dream. So we created no one-to-one product export honoring all the Eclipse oddities. So this means this haven't really been possible because I've started out with it carrying over one oddity after the other, and then I ended up with a total chaos and nothing was working at all. So I said for myself, start from scratch, just do it as plain as possible to get the simple thing running, and it turned out it covered most of the cases I had at least. So I can start an Eclipse IDE with it, I can export an Eclipse IDE with it, so and if this works, what else should there be in the end? So I guess there's one nook and cranny, not every nook and cranny is covered, but this is how it's done. So this means what I said with the properties, for example, I'm not supporting the Eclipse properties, we support the OCI properties, which do the same thing. This also means there's no support for an actual product definition file because I found out it's not really necessary. So the more I had all the things and used it with BND, I thought like, okay, one could do a translation, but why? So because there's a lot of things in it which are actually not really needed. And yeah, in the end, I ended up to provide an own launcher which can handle and work with the native launcher in the end. So now you're forewarned for the whole thing. Another thing before we get started, so the prerequisites for the whole thing, this is currently one of our Gecko projects, which is our open source line, so to speak. The whole thing requires at the moment the latest BND snapshot build 4.4 in order to work, and additionally we have a repackaged as we took the Eclipse bundle pool we use and indexed is as an OBR because even if BND supports P2, what it does not support are these deflated plugins. So there's this, you might have seen it in the manifest somewhere, Eclipse bundle shape dir, which then deflates the jar file, and this is how P2 is storing the whole thing, and this is something BND simply cannot handle at the moment because they say, or usually we work with jars, so and not with the deflated things. So we have a version where we at least took for the Windows and Linux things all the fragments in, packaged the whole things as jars and thrown an index over it. So for the time being, this is what is needed to be used. So, or you can do it yourself if you like to do it. So I've told you about the resolver issue. This is just an example. At the first try, as we tried to figure out how to use it, we took I believe it was the normal demo starting tutorial Eclipse RCP thing you can generate. Simply, we migrated it to a BND project, built the whole thing. I threw it in the resolver, said, resolve what do you need? And this is what the bundle came up with. So it needs SVT. So there's no Eclipse, nothing around it. So the reason is that it does not work, it has any requirements in the manifest. It only imports, I believe SVT came in because we used a label in it. So if not, the bundle does not say anything about its requirements around it. So this is one of the first problems that needed solving, and now I want to show you how it actually works. So, oh yeah, there was something. Give me a second. So, looks better. To give you an idea. The whole thing I have here is because of time limitations, I show you a plugin we currently provide with the project. It's a small little thing where we can convert feature XMLs and their dependency tree into requirements and capabilities. It's currently like a beta version, so don't expect too much of it. It works, but it does it in a really crude manner. And because we always say eat your own dog food, so I use the whole process we developed to start the whole thing. So what it comes up with, the resolving issue we solve by doing something manual. This tool will do in the end for you. We created for a couple of, in this case manually, still for a couple of features, requirements and capabilities which define the bundles that are necessary to have EMF, E4, the Eclipse console, and so on and so forth. So things you usually would pull in via features. So after this is done, we have our BND run, which has only this bundle inside. And when I hit resolve, I will not do it right now because it takes a little bit of time, and I believe we are a bit pressed for time. When you do the whole thing, something like this comes up. So you see E4, you see UI, EMF, Equinox, JFace, so whatever is needed in here. Basically, it comes with the things that are necessary to work with. Because we want to use an UI, everything we do is basically system specific. So in Eclipse, it does define all these things in one property product definition. So in our case, in BND, it works a little bit different. Every BND run will become an own or can be exported separately. So I have another BND run which defines only the system specific bundles here. So they can be resolved separately. And what it does, it includes everything in the basic run. So you have all the non-system features in here, the non-system bundles in here and definitions. So this is what you're actually working with. And this is the run bundles that are then needed for my Windows system, for example. This is also what needs then to be started and debugged and so on and so forth, also this file. I also have ideas how to solve this with requirements and capabilities, but I'm not there yet. So when we have the current setup, this is relatively plain. I will hit start here. So we have the trace mode on, so don't please stick with me here. So what happens now? Nothing, as we see. And this is on purpose. Because when we look at it like this, you see a lot of bundles are still unresolved. A few are active for some reason. A lot of are in starting mode. So nobody's here to do anything. Okay, 5 minutes left. I have to hurry a bit. So we want to get it done, the whole thing. Then what do we need to do? We need to tell the system to start my application, because this is what's missing at the moment. We have these neat little bundles here which do this from inside the framework. Usually they will be resolved with the rest, but I put it out to just for the showcase here. So when we now start it again, so we see the whole thing takes a moment, and we have an IDE running. And here, down here, this is the little plugin we are talking about here. So we'll not go into detail here. So, okay, part of the way we have. Now the thing is, okay, we have an RCP, we want to have our splash screen in here as well. So, and this is now where the actual Eclipse, also the actual launcher and exporter comes in. You skip the whole thing here, go back in here. We have to add 2 more components to the whole thing. And this is, we have to put 2 jars on the run path. The upper jar is a BND plugin, which puts in an own project launcher for BNDTools itself, and also handles the export. And the other one is then starting the splash screen from inside the framework. So we do it like here. And what splash screen to use is simply defined as a property somewhere with splash location, which needs to reside somewhere. Yeah. We launch it again, and we have a splash screen. And it should even go away when the UI comes up. Okay. Now we're not done yet. We're not done yet. I have one more. So now, okay, we want to have something exported. We don't want a self-executable jar. So next step, we hit export. Yeah, it's still named self-executable jar because this is how BND is doing it, and I've simply replaced the normal mechanism down here. So then I export it in here, just you see it and believe me, the folder is empty. And hit finish. It's rather quick. So now it's not empty anymore. And it actually looks a bit like usually Eclipse does, so it's the same things in here. The only difference is the DLL for the splash screen is already extracted in here. The configurations is now the launcher property is from BND, and also the splash screen is residing. Also I've told him to include it in my build in the end. So, and when we start this thing, we have the same situation. Ta-da! So, because not that much time left. Next steps, what I hope to achieve, I've already started talking to BJ and in parts to Peter Greens. Maybe we get a possibility out of it to really integrate it into BND, so not all of it is a separate project. Maybe. So we have to see how this is going. I've also started talking with Tom Watson to get a few things done in Equinox itself, because, for example, the native launcher and the native DLL, which is currently determined by Magic, I have provided another bundle which wraps this and provides capability, so I can identify it. So he sees the possibility that Equinox itself can do this by default. Another thing, the support for language-specific splash screens is missing at the moment, so this is something I will work on in the future. Also, some kind of support for this deflated bundles, so we don't have to go all the way out, because I know that for Eclipse itself or the RCP, this makes sense to deflate things on when it's built. The thing with the requirement annotations, in order to get rid of the feature XMLs, at least at resolving and at build time, is another thing. Also, a better support for feature and P2 update side builds. So we can currently do it with a wild mix of using BND and Gradle and starting the P2 director and everything in the background. So I hope to get the time to put this in a kind of exporter, to have it as a kind of more native functionality in BND. Also, yeah, more templates for the whole thing, like a workspace template for BND. I already started on on plugin or on project templates, so you can create RCP plugins with everything that is needed in an OCI BND compatible way. Yeah, and also I already have kind of a tutorial. It's not online at the moment for the whole thing. I have to translate a few things and get it cleaned up. And yeah, more tutorials and documentation for the whole thing. So, thanks for listening. Hope I'm on time. Yeah, so here are the repositories. You can look all the things up. I will put up the slides. Like I said, this is currently there is a release available. Please bear with me. It's I only converted the basic use cases. It might also be a bit bitchy in parts at the moment, but I hope it gets adopted and I get input from you and from users to see what we need to improve, what needs to be implemented. Next. Any questions? Do we still have time for questions? Okay, so you start then BJ. No, also the embedded launcher with in BND and also in Eclipse itself is just a small piece of code which says, okay, I'm preparing that this framework is started and that it gets its own class loader, basically. And you can, I'm not quite sure how it is in Eclipse, but in BND you can say, okay, I have this run path code, which then is put on the same class path as the first bundle, as the framework that is loaded with. So meaning this is, when you have something which everybody needs to know about, you can put it there, then it's not really an OCI bundle, so, but the code is accessible basically from everybody. Yeah, some close to this. Yep. Yeah, and you can also export, declare the system exports. So let basically the framework underneath the bundle 0 exports your packages then, so everybody can access them. Yeah. Peter? Yeah. Yes. So it's at the moment, the whole thing, because Equinox and Eclipse is intertwined. I really had naming issues. What should I put? Where should I put Equinox in the name because this is Equinox specific? Where should I put BND in the name? Where should I put Eclipse RCP in the name or Eclipse itself? So they are the bundles I use to get the thing started is something which is has nothing to do with BND. So this is just something like the supplement bundle for OSGI, for instance. So, but the only thing which could go into BND would be the project launcher and my version of the embedded launcher. So this is just two side as a small parts. Yeah. Yeah, the only thing we did not repackage, we had a script which goes over the P2 plugins folder, jars, also puts all the deflated thing folders into jars, which then are simply the bundles, and then we let the indexer go over it, because the OCI or BND indexer simply ignores folders, so it would not recognize that these bundles are there. And yeah, unfortunately not all. So that's the thing. So if I could find all the target platformer and all the bundle pool on Maven, I would be happy, but it's simply not the case. So you always will get your things from Eclipse for RCP in P2, also at least at the moment. Just, yeah. So they have a nexus, they have everything in place. So some things are in some kind of a Maven repository. I have no idea why they don't do it. So not with all their things. Can't tell. So I would be happy if they would switch it.
All right. I guess we have to switch to the next, or prepare the next presentation. Thank you, Jürgen.